everyone, and welcome to another episode of Genetically Podified, the podcast that is trying to tell you everything you need to know about genetically modified food.
Everything.
Okay?
Everything.
Everything. Hello, James. How are you today?
I'm very well, Roberta. How are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. I've got a little bit of a cold, so my voice is a little bit nasal. Is that a word?
Nasal, yeah, nasal.
Nasal.
I like nasal, though.
Nozzle sounds like the nozzle.
Yeah. Or like nuzzling
thing.
up to someone. It's something pets do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a
seen
cold as well, so I'm told
Yeah.
that my voice is particularly deep and sultry today.
I was trying to understand. I thought for a minute you wanted to sound a little bit more manly. But like
I always sound
almost
manly,
like,
Roberta. How dare you?
No, you like manly to the level of what's the name of the servant from the Addams Family?
I don't know. I've not watched it.
Like
What
really
about Barry
tall
White?
guy,
A bit like Barry White.
A little bit, yeah, like Barry White, manly.
Deep, sultry,
Very
hot
deep.
chocolates.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. But yeah. So yeah, for whoever's listening, bear with us. We might be coughing and sniffling, but yeah there's not.
By next
nothing
week,
I
I'll
can do about
sound
that.
horrible again, so don't worry about it.
Right. I actually saw you pretty recently, didn't I?
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
I was up in Sheffield for the rare occasion.
Indeed, because for those who don't know, James is currently living in London. He moved back to London, and I am in Sheffield because he's in a later stage of his PhD. Bless you. And I'm still deep into the darkest bit of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you want to tell our listeners what you did over the weekend?
Yeah. So I was up for the Sheffield Food Festival, and I was invited to give a talk. They saw my project about seeds and in trying to improve nutrition and size, and they were like, hey, do you want to come up and speak about that to the public? And I was like, I'll come up and speak, but I'm not talking about that. I'm going to talk about GM. And thankfully they were fine with that. So yeah, I went and gave a 15-minute kind of like a summary of what we want these podcasts to be to the public. You know, when I say the public, I mean like thousands of people, you know. It was incredible. There were fireworks, choreography. It was a spectacle.
Yeah. Interpretive dancing behind you as you were talking about it.
Yeah, people interpreting GM was weird. The other thing that was cool about it is that the whole thing was recorded. So if anyone wants to never listen to this podcast again, but would like to find out all about GM in a 15-minute short talk and then about 10 minutes worth of questions, that will be online, and then you can share that as like a good advertisement for what this podcast is going to be about. And I think if you enjoy the talk and the nature of it, then you will probably enjoy this podcast. So it might be a good way to introduce new listeners if you want to start sharing this podcast around.
Yeah, I agree. And may I say, you did a really good job, James.
Thank you very much.
I thought
we had
really
a question
good
at the end, which was all about the legislation side, and I was like, oh, fuck, I don't know anything about legislation. But Roberta's over there. Just come up here, come and join my talk. But in the end, I just had to wing it, and I think I did okay.
You did fine. You did absolutely fine. Yeah, it was great. But yeah, should we get cracking and start with this episode?
Let's do it.
Right, so today's episode is all about James.
The magnificence that is me.
James the Magnificent. Today's episode is supposed to be a crash course of the sciencey bits that you might want to know before you get into the nitty-gritty of GM technology and CRISPR and gene editing and all that kind of stuff that is a little bit more sciencey. So if you feel really confident about your biology knowledge, you can skip this episode altogether. But if you feel like...
Get out of here, you fucking nerd.
Get out of here. But if you feel like you could use some refreshing of all the different parts, the different building blocks of life, please listen, and also let us know at the end of it if it was helpful or not.
If the listeners all reply that this was utter shite, then I will have to change how I do it.
We might do a video podcast with a whiteboard and draw things. Maybe that'd
be quite fun, actually. Yeah, we'll see if we need to. Yeah.
Right. So I'll leave it to James, and I'll be here listening and commenting because again, I don't know everything, but he kind of does. So I'll be asking questions as well.
Well, no, I won't claim that. I know to a PhD level.
Yeah.
How about
that? Exactly. Right.
All right, cool. So before I start getting into the science nitty-gritty, I just want to clarify a couple of things. Firstly, I'm keeping this as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And to that end, I will be missing steps that I feel you don't really need to understand GM. Mm-hmm. If that bothers you, I'm sorry. The aim is to be accessible, but hopefully not patronising.
Yeah.
So if it appears I'm patronising, I apologise again. I'm just trying to be as clear as possible so that anyone who wants to understand it can do. Alrighty, and without further ado, let's get going.
Get into it.
So the first thing I want to discuss is going right down to the very small, the elements of life, is atoms. So hopefully you've all heard of these. You might have heard of the periodic table. And I'm not going to go into the big details of how all these atoms are different from each other, what they do differently, the differences in sizes and weights and where they're found and what they bind and what not. Too much information. We don't need that business. But the only thing I want people to know and understand about atoms is that they are kind of like Lego. They are building blocks. So in the same way that Lego can stick to each other and start creating bigger things, atoms are very small singular units that bind one another to form bigger structures. And then everything in life is made from these atoms. So the periodic table has a list of all these different types of atoms, all the ones we've discovered. And they are all slightly different, and they can bind each other in different ways. And they bind each other in these massive combinations to create everything in life, the universe and everything. So that's what atoms are. The next step we're going to look at from these atoms, the next thing up is molecules. So this is what we call anything that's a group of two or more atoms that are stuck together, bound together. And in the same way that life is made up of atoms, life is made up of atoms stuck together, making molecules. So some basic examples we can look at are carbon dioxide and H2O. So you might have heard of carbon dioxide as that gas that is ending up warming our world and causing climate change and generally fucking things up. And H2O is just water.
Dihydrogen monoxide is going to
dihydrogen monoxide, yeah.
That's water, you guys. Just so you know, it's water. It's fine.
Water, calm down.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I chose these two very small molecules just to get across a couple of interesting things about what happens when atoms come together. So carbon dioxide, CO2, has got one carbon atom, the C, and two oxygen atoms, the O2. And water, H2O, has two hydrogen atoms, H2, and one oxygen atom, O. So both of these molecules have three atoms. Both of them have an oxygen atom, at least one. Carbon dioxide has two. And both of them are really small.
Yeah.
But they are very different from each other. Carbon dioxide is a gas, water is a liquid, and they do very different things. And even beyond that, when you look at carbon dioxide, CO2, we breathe that in because it's part of our atmosphere. We don't use it, but it gets into our lungs. And it doesn't really do anything to us. But carbon monoxide, which is just CO, carbon and one oxygen, if we breathe that in, it can kill us. It stops us being able to breathe and we die. And that's just one atom different. So you can see, even at this very basic starting level, the difference between molecules, these very tiny differences, one atom can make a huge difference in what that molecule actually does and how it works.
Can mean the difference between life and death, in a way.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So that's what a molecule is. It's just a group of atoms. And those are some small ones. Carbon dioxide and water are quite small ones. But we want to talk about here two different types of molecules, so groups of atoms, which are incredibly important for life. The first one I want to discuss is nucleotides. So nucleotides are molecules which are around about 15 atoms. And there are 4 different types. I won't go into their science names, there's no point.
No.
But they are shortened to the letters that they start with. So G, C, A, and T. Golf, Charlie, Alpha, Tango.
Yeah, I guess if that works for you, that's fine. I mean, that doesn't help me remember them, but if it helps you, it's fine.
No, I was just trying to get the letters clear. But what helps me remember them is I remember it in that order, so G-C-A-T, because then I remember it as G-Cat. And G obviously is a shortening of gangster, so it's just a gangster cat, with all the hanging around with all the nucleotides. So that's how I remember it, just like a cat with like a big gold chain and maybe a gold grill for his teeth and stuff like that.
We should make a meme for that.
Oh yeah, oh shit, yeah, definitely, that'd be a joke. So why am I telling you about nucleotides? nucleotides are the molecules that get together in these extremely long chains to form DNA. So you have G, C, A, and T, and they can form these really, really long chains of GG, CC, AT, GC, AGC, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it just continues and continues and continues, and that makes up your DNA. And when we are talking about the DNA code, it's that order of nucleotides that we are talking about, which encodes our life. So these nucleotides get into these really long chains called chromosomes. And that's where our genes are involved in. So if you imagine the whole chromosome, this massive long string of nucleotides is a piece of string.
Mm-hmm.
And then small sections of that piece of string are individual genes. And that's what nucleotides are. Okay, so for the moment, we're going to leave DNA because I want to tell you about something completely different that a lot of the public doesn't really appreciate, but it's key to understanding genetic modification.
Right.
This type of molecule is called an amino acid. So you may have heard of these in terms of the essential amino acids that you need in your diet that you can get from plants.
Yeah.
And so these molecules are about 15 to 23 atoms, and there are 20 different types. Unlike nucleotides, which only have 4, there are 20 different amino acids. I'm not going to name them all because who the fuck cares, right?
Nobody cares.
Protein researchers probably care, but the rest of us, doesn't matter. But what does matter? So just like nucleotides come together to form these really long chains, going from a small molecule to making a really big chain molecule, amino acids do the exact same thing. But instead of forming DNA, amino acids come together to form proteins.
Right.
So why am I telling you about proteins? Well, for this, I'm going to take the example of looking at your hand. So, Roberta, if you would, please, look at your hand.
Yes. I'm excited. Okay.
We're going to go from the outside in.
Okay.
So what's the first layer that you can see on your hand? What have you got on your hand?
I've probably got sweat, but that's probably not what we're interested about. It's skin, I guess.
Skin, yeah. The skin cells. One of the really important things in skin is a protein called keratin.
Right.
And it's waterproof and it gives structure and it gives strength to your skin. And it creates this barrier so that things just can't get into our bloodstream and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And all of that is because of this massive accumulation of a protein called keratin.
Cool.
On my hand, the first layer is some hairy knuckles, actually. And that, again, the thing that makes hair, again, is just another form of keratin being put into these cells and packed into these cells that forms hair. Okay, what's the next layer down? What have you got?
Right, I'm gonna say probably fat and vessels.
Yeah.
And like veins and stuff.
Yeah, so we'll come to fat in a bit, but we'll look at the blood vessels for the moment. So the blood vessels, these tubes that carry the blood all around your body. There are really important parts of them that are proteins. In fact, they are mostly protein-based. So the blood vessels themselves mostly are made out of a protein called collagen. And collagen is a protein that makes up a huge amount of your body. Apart from water, it's the most abundant thing in your body.
I genuinely didn't know that.
It's also part of your skin as well. Right. It provides structure and it provides robustness to the body and stops things from just falling apart. So it's these long chains that hold everything tightly together and make sure our body just doesn't fall apart. Also, there is in our blood vessels, we have a protein called elastin. And elastin, like its name says, is a very springy protein, so it's kind of like an elastic band. And that allows our blood vessels to expand as the heart pumps blood through them, and then contract as well, so we don't lose blood pressure. And then within our blood vessels, we have the actual blood. The blood cells are packed full of hemoglobin, which carries the oxygen around our body to make sure we can move and our body has enough energy to do things. And that protein, hemoglobin, binds the oxygen and it's extremely important, and it also is what makes blood red. And that's a protein that is enabling your body to survive and live. In your white blood cells, the cells sense other nasty things that they want to kill and destroy via proteins on the cell membrane. So they detect things via small proteins that can go, oh, that feels weird, got to kill that. You have antibodies, which are other proteins that go around in your blood and detect and neutralize pathogens and things that are trying to hurt you. So there's all these proteins doing lots of different stuff. Okay, next layer. What are we going for?
Next layer. Okay. Muscles.
Yeah, muscles. Okay.
But not lots.
Yeah, not in the hand, I suppose. But in my massive butt, loads of muscles.
In my case, not everywhere.
Yeah, so muscles are entirely protein. That's probably where you've heard of protein in terms of eating different types of meats. The bit you're eating is the muscle.
Yeah.
But actually, the muscle are made out of, again, long chains of these two proteins primarily, called actin and myosin. And they form a sort of ratcheting motion, which pulls the muscles together and enables your muscles to contract. So these are the proteins that enable you to move and to control yourself. What else have we got?
I'm going to say bones.
Yeah, bone. And bone also is full of different types of proteins. So one of the key proteins in bone, again, is collagen in a different structure, providing rigidity and strength to the bone. But you also have cells inside your bones which are moving through it and removing some of the structure and adding some of the structure as and where it's needed. And all of that is performed by proteins. And so that's kind of like their importance in terms of physical structure. But if we look deeper, we've got cells as well. Our whole body is made up of these individual cells that perform specific actions. And everything in these cells is run by different proteins. You have proteins that break things down, proteins that make things like the fat, proteins that help to break down carbohydrates and perform chemical reactions. You have proteins that hunt things down. You have proteins that allow other proteins to be transported. You've got proteins that help other proteins to be made. You've got proteins that read DNA to make more proteins. You've got proteins to destroy proteins. Proteins fucking everywhere.
Help!
Yeah. So, in short, proteins are pretty important. So why am I telling you about proteins? Is it just because I love proteins and I'm a protein dude?
You've been talking about proteins for a very long time now. Where are you going with this?
Oh, nowhere. I just wanted to talk about proteins, yeah.
Okay, bye everybody.
That's the end. See you later. Welcome to Genetically Proteinified.
No, there's a point. There's a point.
Yeah, there is. There's always a point. So I'm telling you about proteins because going back to nucleotides and the genetic code, what this genetic code is coding for is the order of amino acids to make different proteins. So you have an order of nucleotides in DNA, and this code, every 3 nucleotides, it doesn't really matter, but every 3 nucleotides codes for a different amino acid. Right. And those amino acids then form a long chain and make different proteins. So if you have a different genetic code, you make a different amino acid chain, which makes a different protein. So every individual gene, every section along that piece of string, makes a different protein.
That's pretty cool. What can I ask you something? What is your favorite amino acid?
My favorite amino acid.
Do you have a favorite amino acid?
Yeah,
question,
I think my favorite amino acid is proline.
Right. Which one
because,
is it?
Because it's unique. It's got a really weird shape.
Okay.
So when amino acid chains start folding to form the correct protein shape, prolines make them do like a weird 90-degree turn. So they're just kind of fun and interesting.
Oh, cool.
What about you?
Well, I was thinking about it as you were talking, and I think my favorite is glutamate or like glutamic acid.
Why?
Because, well, I'm a food scientist, right? And I don't know if you've ever heard of monosodium glutamate in food. It's like a salt.
Yeah.
It's like a sodium
it's an
salt.
additive or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an ingredient. It's an additive that gives a lot of umami flavor, and it's been blamed like a while ago for like the Chinese restaurant syndrome, where you get a headache and you feel sick after you've been to Chinese restaurants. Big old Chinese restaurant use a lot of it, but no, that's just bullshit. It's just not true.
Oh, is it? Okay,
it's not a thing, but it's like it's underappreciated and misinterpreted, so that's why I like him. He's kind of an underdog of amino acids, I guess.
Fair enough. Cool. So, how do these different proteins do different things? Like I was saying before, the specific nucleotide code makes a specific chain of amino acids, which then folds, instead of being a chain, it folds down into a sort of knot. Mm-hmm. And that knot then, by its shape, has a specific function. So, to understand this, what I want you to do is get your hand out again.
Right, okay.
And hold it in front of you.
Okay, I'm doing it.
So I want you to hold it in a fist. What we've got here is a gene which is making the punching protein.
Okay,
right?
Okay. I like that.
So your hand is the protein, and as it's in a fist, this hand as it is now, this protein is really good for punching things, right?
Okay, cool.
So we've got a gene, so it's got a series of nucleotides that form a series of, like a string of amino acids, which folds down to make this perfect protein, which is good for punching, but not really much else, I suppose.
Okay.
Okay, now what I want you to do is move your thumb.
Okay.
So it's now a thumbs up.
Okay. There we go.
Okay. So what we've done genetically here is we have changed some nucleotides in the gene, which has changed the sequence of amino acids. So this amino acid chain now folds into a different shaped knot and a different protein. Okay. And this new protein is not very good at punching, but it's very good at telling people, well done, good job.
The well done protein.
Exactly. This is the good job protein.
Aww.
And how did we get there from the punching protein to the good job protein? All we did was change some amino acids, and that has changed the shape.
Yeah,
and that has changed the function of that protein.
Right, I get.
And we've got one more of these, so I want you to put your thumb down.
Okay.
And now put your middle finger up. Yeah.
Right.
So now what we've done again is we've changed the nucleotide sequence in the gene. That has changed the sequence of amino acids. So that chain now folds in a slightly different way to form a slightly different shape.
Right.
And because of it's got a different shape, it has a different function.
Of course.
This protein is not good at punching people. It's definitely not good at telling people good job. This is the fuck you protein. This is the get out of my face protein. And it is really good at that.
Definitely. Absolutely. Very efficient.
Yeah.
Extremely efficient.
That's kind of how proteins work. You have a sequence of nucleotides that form a very specific sequence of amino acids, which then fold into a very specific shape. And that very specific shape gives it a very specific function, which enable us to live and do the multiple things that we can do.
Right.
And that's how you go from the DNA which codes life to the protein which makes life up.
Oh, I like this. Like as a summary, like DNA codes for life and proteins actually make up the pieces of life. That's quite
exactly,
I like
yeah.
That. What's next?
So that's it in terms of the basics you need to know for understanding what GM is. So now we can talk a bit more about how GM works. So a lot of people might have seen these like images. I bet I could just Google GM now and I'd get that really fucking annoying image where it's like an apple with a syringe sticking out of it and some evil looking scientist going, "What?"
There's all sorts.
Makes me so angry.
Me really frustrated.
Because it's just not what's going on. Like, that's how you poison someone. That's what the witch in Snow White did, you know? She got a little syringe, an overdose of heroin in there or something. Like,
those are like the kind of pictures and memes that want me get a tub of chocolate fudge ice cream and just sit in front of TV and crying, kind of. Like, for a scientist, it's really, really frustrating to see how misleading something like that can be, how wrong it can be. Like, I can rant at documentaries on GM for days.
Oh, my days, I know. My goodness.
For the same reason.
Oof, so painful.
Oh, gosh.
I would like to do some episodes
painful.
of... Well, I mean, it might not suit a podcast episode, but something maybe where we visually record ourselves watching these episodes and just pausing and going, that's bullshit.
Oh, yeah, like a reaction video
yeah,
kind
I think
of
that
thing.
could be quite fun.
Yeah, or a review or something like that as well. Like, we can like watch it and then right after record something. If you guys are interested, let us know, because that could be
We'd have
fun.
a lot of watching to do, though. There's some serious shite out there.
There's so much bad stuff. There is also some good stuff, though, like recently.
Yeah, didn't Neil deGrasse Tyson do something? No, was it him? Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Food Evolution,
cool.
I think. It wasn't available in all cinemas, but maybe we can get a hold of it. Maybe we can manage to...
I'm sure we can find it somewhere, yeah. Okay, so GM is not a syringe in an apple. What it's actually doing when we're genetically modifying is kind of what it says on the tin. It's not that scary. We are getting those genes, the genetics, so that nucleotide sequence for a specific gene, and modifying it. That doesn't mean we're injecting with a syringe and just putting some crazy shit in there like, I don't know, embryo brains and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, that is so awful.
Exactly, like we're not injecting it with the sin of the world or something dumb like that. What we're actually doing is modifying the sequence of those nucleotides.
Yes.
So that's one example. You can either change one of the nucleotides for a different nucleotide, you can remove a nucleotide, you can add a nucleotide, and that you can do that individually, or you can remove sections to remove a whole gene, or add in sections to add in a whole gene.
Yes.
In future episodes, we will talk about some of the consequences of that, whether it's good or bad, and how we should do it. But for the moment, I just want you to grasp that that's what's happening when we're talking about genetic modification. It's nothing in itself extremely scary and scientifically and an awful and an abomination or something.
Yeah.
All we're doing is changing specific nucleotides, and nature does that constantly.
Yeah, it's kind of a natural process. DNA has a habit of repairing itself because it can be degraded by a lot of very different things, like for example really high temperatures, or for example UV light. That's why you should wear sunscreen. And in this process sometimes it changes something, and we'll probably talk about mutations and what mutation means in future episodes, but that's kind of how it happens and why it happens, I guess.
I mean, we can very briefly talk about mutations now, because it's very simple really. Anytime you change a nucleotide, you make any change, you remove it, you add it, you change it, you add a chunk, that is a mutation. So that's all it means. It doesn't mean you've had radioactive waste spilled on you and you've now got a 9-pack or whatever. And the powers of Goku.
And blonde hair.
That's what it means. We are changing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it means. You're just changing the nucleotide sequence. I think your comment was really important, Roberta, because this is something that is happening constantly. Every time your cells replicate and make new cells, which is happening constantly, they are making small errors. Every time DNA is damaged by processes which are entirely natural, like sunlight damages our DNA. Every time it's damaged, it gets repaired. And when it's repaired, it can make small changes.
Yeah.
And that is a process which is entirely natural and is how evolution works.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not something that is terrifying and to be scared of. This happens very naturally and very often, and scientists have just gotten better at doing it themselves to change a crop or an organism. Again, we'll talk about that
in the future,
more specifically.
It's kind of hard in these kind of
episodes.
early episodes to hold ourselves back a little bit and say, because it's kind of, we want to say everything, but it's not the right time right now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of, but yeah, hold on, and you'll find out. There. You'll find out soon enough. We'll get there, yeah.
So that's the lesson finished. I'll summarize.
Yeah, okay,
so
go for it.
When we're talking about genetic modification, we are talking about altering nucleotides within genes. Those nucleotides form long strings which form genes, which are part of DNA. And those nucleotides code for a sequence of amino acids. That sequence, that string of amino acids, then forms a protein, which is kind of like a knot. And the structure of that protein gives that protein its specific function.
Yes.
So when we are genetically modifying something, what you're doing is changing a nucleotide in a gene, which changes an amino acid in a protein, which changes the structure of that protein, which changes the function of that protein. And that's all that GM is. So hopefully you now have a basic grasp of what genetic modification is and the science behind it, and you can go and explain it and have fun with telling absolute strangers to fuck off with your hand.
Yep. You can entertain people at the pub with this sorts of topics. Yeah, well, thanks very much, James. That was enlightening.
My pleasure.
I'll remember, what was it, proline? Is that what you said?
Proline, yeah.
I'll remember proline from now on. I didn't know of it.
Man, we're nerds. We have favourite amino acids.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And I had a phrase to put on my wall. Glutamate, my favourite amino acid. Right, so shall I wrap it up?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you very much, James. I hope that this was helpful for people to understand genetics in general a little bit better, and what proteins are made of and what DNA is made of, and how the two kind of interact together. Of course, there are variations to what we've explained today, but this is probably the easiest way you could have possibly explained it. So thanks very much, James. And to all our listeners, if you didn't understand something, if you have questions about something, if you think this was rubbish, please let us know. You can tweet at us at @GenPodified on Twitter, because apparently genetic was too long. So @GenPodified, which is sad. Or you can send us an email at geneticallypodified@gmail.com. So have a look at our website and our Facebook page and leave us reviews for the podcast, because we want to know what you think about it. If you like it, please give us a thumbs up. If you don't like it, let us know why, so that we can make it better.
Indeed.
Right, so we'll leave you here, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.